Defend Our Democracy is calling for political parties to conduct their election campaigns within the ambit of the law. The group's also calling on South Africans to commit to active citizenship as the country marks 30 years of democracy. Defend Our Democracy chairperson, Reverend Ntlha, is with us for more. Reverend, thank you so much for joining us and a happy Freedom Day to you. Now, you've made this call for citizenships and for active citizenship, that is, to mark 30 years of our democracy. How would you describe the last 30 years and the kind of activism that South Africans have shown?
Thank you for having us. The last 30 years have obviously been tumultuous in many ways. There has been, we have to admit, there's been movement in terms of making democracy meaningful for all people, but that's obviously way too far below what was hoped for. Too many people in South Africa seem to feel that they are excluded from the dividends of democracy. The recent study showed that about 65% of South Africans, I think it's the Afrobarometer, 65% of South Africans are, while they're committed to elections as a way of exercising their democracy, but a high number of them are not feeling that this democracy is giving them the dividends they wish for. So there is a lot more to do in order to make democracy meaningful to many people. But I think that it is, if you were to ask whether the freedom achieved is worth it, I think we have to say emphatically, yes, the democracy is worth it, and it's worth defending, and it's worth consolidating, and it's worth protecting.
Mm-hmm. And Reverend, you know, when you make mention of such high stats as well, with 65%, these are high numbers as well, but apart from casting your vote every 5 years in a national election or a local election, what are other ways that people can activate their citizenship and become active members of this democracy?
Yeah, I think that there are many options and avenues available to citizens by which they can exercise their democratic rights. One of those is obviously to hold the elected officials accountable. And this has been very much lacking if we look at the last 30 years, that what used to be a very active citizenship in the country towards the end of apartheid, that there's been a marked decline. And so in a sense, we are seeing an increasing number of civil society organizations coming forth to engage the power holders meaningfully. And our message to South Africans across the board is that this is a moment for us to actually commit ourselves to holding power holders, whether it's at the local level, whether it's at the provincial and national level, hold them accountable. And in one sense, the vote coming up in May is an important way by which citizens can actually decide who they would like to trust with the next 4 years of their lives at the national level, and similarly to in the next 2 years to elect people at local levels and so on. And so these are ways by which citizens can engage government and decide the future of this country. So as Defend Our Democracy, we really are strong in messaging the idea that active citizenship is the way to go. It's the only way we can protect our democracy, make it meaningful for as many of us as is possible, so that we all benefit.
You know, when you speak about that marked decline since the end of apartheid as well, it leads me to this next question, which I was really dying to ask you, Reverend, that are South Africans as united for a common cause as was the case in history, when there was a spirit of fighting for injustice, which was apartheid, of course? Are we seeing these mass protests, mass boycotts that we used to see then? We're not seeing that kind of active citizenship that we were seeing back then, but are we using the other avenues like Chapter 9 institutions in place of the active kind of citizenry that we saw during that period?
I doubt whether the the Chapter 9 institutions are being used as effectively as could be possible. I think South Africans are, at some level, you could see the service delivery protests that have spawned across the country are a way South Africans are expressing their rage, their dissatisfaction with government at different levels. And that also suggests that many people are disillusioned with government for the levels of corruptions that they've witnessed and so on. There's a lot of mistrust, obviously, that comes as a result of the revelations of the Zondo commissions and even ever since then, ongoing scandals that seem to appear. So there's a disillusionment, and there's a sense in which who is there to trust? But as a people, we have to accept that comes with the territory of freedom. Our freedom didn't mean that we have no thugs among us. There are still thugs. There are people that can't be trusted, and we're learning how to look at party lists across the board and satisfy ourselves whether these candidates in all of the political parties, whether any of them have been fingered for with wrongdoing or not. And as citizens can choose and can familiarize with themselves with the track record of the political parties and decide who they would like to vote for. I think that's an important way that citizens can exercise their right as democratic South Africans.
And of course,
to your question about whether, as a society, we have a common vision and a common sense of who we are, I doubt it. I think that one can say that we are still trying to find ourselves and reinvent ourselves. After 30 years of our freedom, we still are not sure who we are. I think political parties in this sense, unfortunately, in the way that they are fighting each other about what kind of society we ought to be, all of that means that we are still not clear where we're headed. There isn't a clarity of vision for the next 10, 20 years. Everything is still up in contestation. So no, we have not forged a common nationhood, a common vision. And that's, I suppose, a battle we have to continue to wage until we find one another.
It is a disservice. And, speaking of other ways that we can also participate and exercise our active citizenship is about the elections campaign that you've established. I think it was in November last year. Tell us about the Elections Watch campaign. Who can be a part of it? And what was the intention behind it?
Yes, thanks for that. The intention was, given that we are heading towards what probably the most contested election in the history of our new democracy, and in light of what we know about what is possible about how power can be corrupted and how even public institutions can fall foul of what is expected, corruption, the Election Watch as a campaign by ourselves as Defend Our Democracy is a way in which we invite citizens across the board, all of those who have registered to vote, to step forward and become volunteers in terms of monitoring and observing elections and satisfying themselves that these elections are not stolen. The integrity of these elections, that is something that civil society as a whole can vouch for and say we're satisfied that these elections were free and fair. And so as we are inviting civil society organizations, but also the organizations and faith groups that have people, trusted South Africans that they would like to encourage to be part of this election monitoring to step forward. And the way you do that is to go to the Defend Our Democracy website, Election Watch, and register your name and be part of the effort by South Africans to make sure that these elections are free and fair.
Reverend, thank you so much for your insights this evening. That was Defend Our Democracy chairperson, Reverend Ntlha.